Alex Eala breaks silence, and nothing about her message was gentle. For weeks, fans begged her to speak, and when she finally did, her words cut straight through the tension surrounding both players. A silence that turned into a spark, and a spark that turned into a storm. Because what Eala revealed didn't just address Rybakina, it exposed a truth the tennis world wasn't ready to hear.
For the longest time, Alex Eala refused to say a single word. Reporters asked, fans speculated, and analysts wondered why her name kept getting tied to Elena Rybakina in whispered conversations around tournaments. Yet every time a mic was placed near her, she simply smiled, nodded, and walked away. It wasn't anger, it wasn't fear. It was something deeper, something she wasn't ready to share. People began to notice the tension long before either of them did. Their schedules rarely crossed, their styles couldn't have been more different, and yet the comparisons never stopped. One was the quiet rising star with a warrior's heart, the other a Grand Slam champion carrying the weight of expectation on her shoulders. Every match, every press conference, every rumor on social media added fuel to a fire neither player had acknowledged. But the silence didn't hide the truth. In fact, it made it louder. Fans kept asking why Eala seemed distant whenever Rybakina's name came up, why she looked away during interviews, why she stayed humble even when she was being pushed into narratives she didn't create. Some said she was intimidated. Others claimed she was protecting something she didn't want the world to see. And then there were those who believed she simply didn't want unnecessary drama. But drama always finds the ones trying hardest to avoid it. Everything shifted during one quiet moment at a tournament press lounge. Reporters had gathered, waiting for a standard post-match talk, expecting nothing more than the usual answers. Instead, they saw Eala pause, not from stress, but from the weight of something she had been carrying for far too long. It wasn't just about her matches. It wasn't about rankings. It wasn't even about rivalry. It was about respect and everything that comes with fighting for it. Behind the scenes, whispers had grown louder, comments that undermined her rise, opinions that compared her to players with entirely different journeys, conversations about pressure, expectations, and real champions. Words that weren't hers, but somehow kept getting attached to her. And Elena Rybakina's name sat right in the center of it all, not because the two disliked each other, but because the world wanted a rivalry, where none existed. And that pressure finally broke something open inside her. She realized that staying silent wasn't protecting her anymore. It was giving life to stories she never approved, narratives she never agreed with. And as she watched the noise build around Rybakina's every move, the controversies, the scrutiny, the misunderstandings, Eala understood that the world would keep twisting her absence of words into whatever shape it wanted. So she made a decision, a quiet, deliberate, unstoppable decision, that the next time she spoke about Rybakina, she wouldn't hold back. Not because she wanted conflict, not because she wanted drama, but because there are moments in every athlete's life when truth becomes heavier than silence. And for Alex Eala, that moment had finally come.
The moment that pushed Alex Eala into breaking her silence didn't happen on court. It didn't come from a wild point, a heated exchange, or a viral clip. It started with a single question, a question she had heard 100 times before, but on this day, it felt different. This time, the weight of it settled into her chest like a stone she could no longer ignore. A reporter leaned forward, voice calm, but the words sharp enough to cut. "Alex, do you think you'll ever reach the level of someone like Elena Rybakina?" It was framed as a harmless comparison, but comparisons can be cruel in ways people don't always see. For months, Eala had been judged not for her wins, but by how closely she resembled someone else's definition of success. Her journey wasn't being celebrated, it was being measured, and not on her terms. She smiled at first, the polite kind of smile athletes are trained to hold. But then, the reporter added something that shifted the entire atmosphere in the room. Some say pressure affects you differently, that champions like Rybakina handle it better. What's your response to that? A murmur rippled through the room. Cameras clicked, eyes locked onto her, waiting for her to break, react, or retreat. But Eala didn't do any of those things. She just sat there, breathing slowly, processing every word that had been tossed her way for months. Doubts, comparisons, quiet jabs disguised as innocent curiosity. That was the trigger. Because pressure wasn't her enemy. Comparison was. For years, she had fought to build something of her own. Every match she played, every breakthrough she achieved came from a place Rybakina never had to walk through, just as Rybakina's journey came from challenges Eala would never fully understand. But the world didn't care about separate paths. It cared about headlines. It cared about drama. It cared about forcing rivalries into existence. And suddenly, she realized something dangerous. She had been letting others write her story for her. The question kept replaying in her mind long after the press conference ended. People weren't asking about her growth. They weren't asking about her matches, her training, her improvements, or her future. They were asking about someone else, as if her identity depended on another player's name. She walked through the hallways of the venue with her jaw set, each step echoing the frustration she had buried for too long. The weight of silence, once comforting, now felt suffocating. She was done being polite for the sake of avoiding headlines. She was done being treated like a shadow in somebody else's spotlight. When she saw her reflection in the window of the lounge, she didn't see the quiet, controlled version of herself the world thought they understood. She saw someone ready to reclaim her narrative, someone who wasn't afraid of truth anymore. And as she sat down later that evening, scrolling through endless comments and opinions, comparing her to Rybakina yet again, something inside her clicked into place. Enough was enough. The next time they asked her about Rybakina, she wouldn't whisper, she wouldn't dodge, she wouldn't pretend to be unaffected. She would tell them exactly what she felt, whether they were ready to hear it or not. When Alex Eala finally spoke, the world wasn't ready. Her words didn't trickle quietly into the press room. They hit like a storm. Social media erupted within minutes. Clips of her statement were shared, dissected, and debated. The crowd that had been quietly watching her career unfold was suddenly divided, caught between admiration and disbelief. Some cheered, some gasped, some questioned her motives, but one thing was clear: no one could ignore her voice anymore. Her statement wasn't an attack, yet it felt like one to those waiting for drama. "I've always respected the players I compete against," she said, eyes steady, voice calm, but firm. Respect is a two-way street, and it's hard to grow in silence when comparisons keep defining who you are, not what you've achieved. Those words alone caused an immediate ripple. Headlines flashed across sports websites. Eala calls out media pressure. Young star speaks her truth. Eala versus Rybakina. The silence ends. Fans flooded comment sections, some praising her honesty, others claiming she was stirring conflict unnecessarily. Every social media platform became a battlefield of opinions, memes, and speculation. Within hours, tennis forums were buzzing. Had a real rivalry just begun, or was this a moment of self-assertion misunderstood as controversy? The public's reaction wasn't confined to online chatter. Former players, coaches, and commentators weighed in. Some applauded her courage to voice frustration with constant comparisons. Others questioned if speaking about another player so directly could strain relationships on tour. It's unusual for someone so young to address another champion publicly, but perhaps this is the pressure of growing under a global microscope, one analyst remarked on a live broadcast. Meanwhile, the crowd at her next match responded in kind.
The stadium felt electric, as if everyone was silently waiting for a reaction, a follow-up, something more. Whispers of the previous statement traveled through the stands, creating an undercurrent of tension. Each point she played was now measured against her words, and every cheer carried the weight of expectation. The pressure she had once quietly endured had transformed into a public spectacle. Fans on social media tried to predict what would happen next. Would Rybakina respond? Would the silence finally break from the other side? The speculation became relentless. Eala's honesty, meant to claim her own narrative, had sparked an uncontrollable chain of reactions, some supportive, some skeptical, and some outright critical. And yet through it all, Alex Eala remained calm. She understood that once words leave your mouth, they belong to the world. The moment she spoke, she accepted the consequences. Every debate, every headline, every reaction was a testament to the influence she now wielded, not just as a rising star, but as someone unafraid to claim her own truth. The storm of public reaction had only just begun, but one thing was certain: Alex Eala's silence was over, and the tennis world was watching, waiting, and reacting in ways no one could have predicted.
The moment Alex Eala's words spread, the fallout was immediate and unforgiving. Headlines exploded across social media, each one twisting, amplifying, or sensationalizing her statement. Some framed it as a bold stand, while others painted it as unnecessary drama. Every fan, journalist, and commentator had an opinion, and every opinion seemed louder than the last. The world had expected silence, and now that silence had been broken, chaos followed. Not everyone celebrated her courage. Critics jumped in quickly, questioning whether a young player should speak publicly about another champion. Why drag someone else into your own narrative? Some asked. Others suggested Eala was seeking attention or trying to manufacture a rivalry where none existed. Even among supporters, there were whispers of doubt. Had she misjudged the moment? Had honesty turned into controversy? The line between truth and tension became blurred almost instantly. Eala herself had to navigate the backlash while keeping her focus on tennis. Every match now carried an extra weight. Every media interaction a potential spark for misinterpretation. The pressure that had built up quietly over years became tangible and relentless. Fans in the stands were no longer just watching points. They were watching a narrative unfold. Every cheer, every murmur, every glance carried assumptions. Was she playing with extra aggression because of the controversy? Or was this just the natural fire of a rising star? The coaching staff, friends, and mentors tried to shield her, but the backlash was inescapable. Online forums dissected every word, replayed every soundbite, and speculated about her intentions. Memes, opinion pieces, and even podcasts debated whether her message was a call for respect or a provocation. Some claimed Rybakina would feel disrespected, while others predicted a media-fueled showdown at the next tournament. The tennis community was polarized, half defending Eala's honesty, half questioning her judgment. Even the crowd's reaction in her subsequent matches reflected the tension. Spectators whispered, cameras captured subtle gestures, and murmurs of, "Did you see what she said?" followed her every movement. The applause was mixed, sometimes supportive, sometimes hesitant. The arena felt charged, like every point carried more than just a score. It carried the weight of perception, expectation, and speculation. Despite all of this, Eala remained composed. She knew that backlash is often part of being a rising star willing to speak the truth. She understood that controversy doesn't always equal conflict, and that her words were never meant to attack anyone personally. They were meant to reclaim her story. Yet even she couldn't ignore the intensity of reactions swirling around her. Each headline, tweet, and comment was a reminder that once you break silence, the world responds in ways you cannot control. And through it all, one thing became undeniably clear. Alex Eala's voice had consequences. The fallout wasn't just about headlines. It was about perception, respect, and power in the world of professional tennis. The storm she had sparked had arrived, and there was no turning back.
After days of speculation, endless debates, and media frenzy, the moment of clarity finally arrived. Alex Eala's words had stirred the world,
but they were never meant to create enemies. They were meant to reveal a truth long suppressed. And in the quiet aftermath, that truth began to take shape. The first sign came in interviews, where journalists approached her with cautious respect. No longer pushing for sound bites that could be twisted, they allowed her to speak fully, to explain the feelings behind her statement. It wasn't about conflict, she said, voice steady, eyes unwavering. It was about recognition, for the journey, the effort, and the moments no one sees. Every player faces pressure. Every player fights battles off the court. I just wanted my voice to be heard, without comparisons or assumptions. Fans responded with overwhelming support. Messages poured in from around the world, from people who had faced similar pressures in sports, academics, or life itself. They shared stories of being measured against others, of growing up in the shadow of someone else's accomplishments. For them, Eala's honesty was not a spark of conflict. It was validation, a reminder that speaking the truth matters, even if it's uncomfortable. Even within the tennis community, the tone began to shift. Fellow players, coaches, and commentators recognized the courage it took for a young athlete to address an uncomfortable topic openly. Analysts praised her for articulating a universal struggle: how to grow, assert yourself, and demand respect in a world that constantly measures your worth against someone else. The narrative began to change. What had been seen as confrontation was reframed as empowerment. And then came the response from Elena Rybakina herself. No drama, no sensational headlines, just quiet acknowledgement. In a short statement, she said, "I respect Alex's honesty. Every player has a journey, and it's important to own it. We are all competing, and competition isn't just about scores. It's about respect, perseverance, and growth." The simplicity of her response diffused tension, leaving only clarity. There was no rivalry manufactured, no bitterness lingering, just two champions recognizing the challenges each faced. The world of tennis paused, reflecting on what had happened. Eala's statement was no longer a controversy, it had become a conversation. It reminded fans and critics alike that words carry power, but they also carry responsibility. Speaking truth doesn't have to create conflict. Sometimes it builds understanding. By addressing the pressure, the comparisons, and the unseen struggles, Alex Eala reclaimed her narrative. She had broken silence not to attack, but to assert her identity. She had sparked debate not to provoke, but to inspire. And in doing so, she transformed a moment of tension into a lasting statement of strength and integrity. For Alex, the resolution was simple yet profound. Her voice mattered, and the world had finally heard it, not as rumor, not as drama, but as the truth she had always carried within her.
In the weeks that followed, the storm surrounding Alex Eala's statement began to settle, leaving behind something far more powerful than gossip or speculation. The tennis world had witnessed more than just a rising star speaking out. It had witnessed a young athlete claiming her space, defining her journey on her own terms. Eala reflected quietly on what had happened. The media frenzy, the social media debates, the pressure of public opinion, all of it had been overwhelming. But through it all, she discovered a truth that transcended wins and losses. Courage isn't always about what happens on court. Sometimes, courage is about speaking up, standing firm, and refusing to let others define your story. Fans and aspiring athletes noticed it too. Across online forums, comment sections, and fan pages, countless messages poured in, praising her honesty, resilience, and strength. They didn't just admire her tennis skills. They admired her voice, her refusal to be silenced, and her determination to face pressure head-on. In many ways, Alex had become more than a champion. She had become a symbol for every young player navigating the weight of expectations, comparisons, and the glare of public scrutiny.
And then there was Rybakina. Far from being an antagonist, she remained a silent partner in the story. The mutual respect between the two athletes became an unspoken lesson. Competition doesn't require conflict. Rivalry doesn't require resentment. And recognition doesn't need to come at the expense of another person's dignity. Their interaction, once poised on the edge of controversy, now stood as a subtle but powerful example of maturity, professionalism, and empathy. For Alex Eala, the legacy of this moment wasn't a headline or a viral clip. It was the awareness she created. She had challenged the narrative that silence equals grace, showing instead that speaking the truth is an equally valid form of courage. The moments of tension, the gasps from the crowd, and the heated debates online were no longer the story. They were the backdrop to her real achievement, reclaiming her voice and her journey. And as she walked onto the court for her next match, the energy surrounding her was different. It wasn't fear. It wasn't judgment. It was acknowledgement. The world had listened, learned, and adjusted. And Alex, quiet but unwavering, had set a standard, not just for herself, but for every player who would follow in her footsteps. Her story is a reminder silence can protect, but truth empowers. Comparisons can intimidate, but courage liberates. Pressure can weigh heavily, but integrity always shines through. And in the world of professional tennis, where every point counts and every word carries weight, sometimes the greatest victories happen off the court.
Alex Eala's words reminded the world that strength isn't just measured in titles or trophies. It's measured in courage, honesty, and the ability to define your own story. If you were inspired by her journey, her courage, and the way she stood her ground, hit that subscribe button and join us for more stories of women in tennis who challenge the game, the expectations, and the world.